A very good evening to everyone who's joining us today, and a very good morning to ones who are joining us from the western part of the world. I'm Ashud Bhatt, and I'm the host for today's session on Detox or Disruptive Literacy Talks. In the past 3 weeks, we've had exceptional speakers speak about challenges that we face with respect to literacy, not just in India, but across the world. And all these exceptional speakers have talked about innovative methods, innovative solutions that can really help disrupt the challenges of large-scale illiteracy, which many of our children and adults still face. And today we have another exceptional speaker, Miss Mary McCool-Berry. She is a literacy specialist who has worked with children as a public school educator for over 3 decades in the United States. She has also been involved with the literacy movement as well. The organization, she's founded the organization Schools with Soul, which promotes active learning to build students' background knowledge as well. Ms. Berry is a passionate educator. She believes that schools and organizations must provide experiences for children and to help them use their imagination through project-based and problem-based learning as well. And more recently, she's also traveled to the island nation of St. Lucia as a volunteer. She's taught teachers and students there using the Wilson reading system as well. And that's something which we are very eager and curious to learn more about as well. She has also appeared on the Thinklim.com podcast, and where she spoke about parents do not know what is available to teach their kids reading. And this is also a podcast which she has featured in as well. So this is just a small list of many of her achievements. We would like to welcome Miss McCool-Berry again. Thank you so much. Mary, for joining us and for finding a time. And a good morning to you as well.
Good morning, Mashood. I'm deeply honored to be a speaker, to appear as a speaker for Detox. It's this mission of disrupting literacy across the world is something that's really important to me as well. So I'm honored.
The honor is completely ours, Mary. And the format which we'll follow in this session is Mary has a very interesting presentation for all of us. So Mary will be making the presentation first, and this will be followed by an interactive discussion where we're also expecting Sunita Gandhiji also to join us with her questions and comments as well. We'd also request all those who are joining us live on YouTube and Facebook to please keep sharing your questions and comments in the chat section, and we'll be happy to take some of those questions for Mary as well. So Mary, the stage is yours. With the presentation, you may just keep letting me know when to proceed on the next slide. Thank you.
I will. Thank you, Mashood. So the title of my presentation is Literacy Crisis in America. Who knew that we had a literacy crisis? It's not much talked about, but we have some reporters who are doing some very fine investigating and cognitive scientists who have been researching for over 2 decades, and they know exactly what works. But this is a problem across America. Okay, Mashood, you can go to the first slide. So I guess where I'll begin is that learning to read is an unnatural act. Many people who are readers think they came to it naturally. And for most of us, reading is, we come to it in a good way. But for 40%, cognitive scientists know for 40% of the people, it's very difficult. It is an unnatural act. It has to be taught to children in the early stages of their life. So it has to be taught systematically and explicitly. And a misconception is that many people think that just giving the child books, they will figure it out. But really, that is not true. And unfortunately, some popular reading methods in the US are not working, and that's contributing to our literacy crisis. Okay, change the slide. So currently, this was the most recent statistic, Over 30% of our students in the US do not read proficiently. It hasn't improved our literacy rate in decades. And 65% of our fourth graders, so those are children about 10 years old, read at a level considered essential or below. And this is based on 2019 data. So it's an enormous problem in the United States. Okay, change slide, please. Change the slide, please. One of the most alarming things I came across was that the reading scores were lower most recently in 2019 in both grades 4 and 8. So what are we doing wrong? Where are we missing the road with every child learns to read? Thank you for changing the slide. Okay, so a big problem is that it's a fashionable thing. You know, when I started in education over 30 years ago, there was whole language. It was the whole language movement where we believed it was best for kids to learn through real books. And so they had a lot of books and we expected them to read. Now the trend in America is balanced literacy. But what scientists who have studied this for a long time, they know balanced literacy does not work for a large segment of people. It is a discredited theory, but unfortunately, reading programs that are used in schools are based on this balanced literacy philosophy. And what is that? And it's watered down whole language where the kids read actual books. They are leveled according to a test they take. But we know through repeated studies that this does not work. So we really have to move in the US toward the science of reading. And what we know, what the experts, the true neurocognitive science experts have learned. Change slide. So, as you know, across the world, why should we care about this whole literacy issue? It's because it matters so enormously to a person's life. So in America, we'll have kids drop out of school. We have a large number of people in the criminal justice system who cannot read. And we also have economic effects. And it also affects our democracy in America when people cannot read and understand the issues or candidates for whom they're voting. So the science of reading really has to make its way. It has to bridge into the schools in America. Slide change. So what are we teaching struggling readers to do during balanced literacy? We're teaching them to memorize words. We're teaching them to use context to guess words. What word might make sense in that sentence? And we're teaching them to skip words that they don't know. And the scientists know that these are the strategies that struggling readers use. But these are also the techniques taught in the balanced literacy programs in our school. So kids should not be asked to guess at a word. They shouldn't be asked to figure out what word might make sense. They absolutely have to learn the sound-symbol relationship. Slide change, please. Okay, so Sarah, this is a girl with whom I've worked. Her name has been changed. She's a 13-year-old with a very good home life and educated parents, has attended school in the US since she was 4 or 5, and cannot read proficiently. Why? So parents, currently I teach several students across the United States virtually, and parents have no idea until it's much later that their kids are really having difficulty reading. And when I ask the parents what program or how the kids have learned to read in their schools, often they don't know because we're so trusting of our education system. Slide change, please. So there's another student, Tim, and he's raised by a single mom, attends school in the U.S., cannot read proficiently. I've worked with many students like Tim and Sarah. Low socioeconomic status, so would be considered living in poverty. And what is the difference between Sarah and Tim? Well, as we know all over the world, privilege matters. So Sarah's parents were able to hire a tutor during the pandemic, as many well-off families were able to do, to tutor their children. But kids that were not able to go online in the US, as well as all over the world during the pandemic, they really, really got left behind. So it's because the literacy club is not granting admission to everyone. It's really, if you have the money to help your child. Slide change, please. So what do skilled readers do? This is from cognitive science. They instantly and automatically read words. So when we read the word table, our brain processes the word table faster than we do the image. So it's something the scientists called orthographic mapping, which occurs in the brain. And it's awareness that these speech sounds in words are represented by letters. So when I first begin with students, I show them how people communicated thousands of years ago, but they all had these logograms, these symbols that represented ideas or words. And so they have to understand the symbol and the sound. It's critical. Please change the slide. Okay, phonics skills matter. When they do not have phonics skills, the process is different. They guess at the letter sounds, they use context. They'll look around at the pictures in the story, they'll try to guess. One of my biggest challenges in working with struggling readers is to break the guessing habit. And they have to, in the program that I teach, they have to read every word accurately, because when they're guessing, it could be really wild and they don't understand. Slide change, please. Okay, so we know that the child must learn the letter sounds of the alphabet. This is called phonemic awareness. People are often confused with phonemic awareness and phonics. Phonemic awareness, if I were in a darkened room and I said the sound F, you would say F. Or if I said B, in English, you would say B. So this child must learn to link those sounds first to the letters. Slide change, please. So students will not become good readers until they're taught how their written language works. And their written language, the words in their written language and how it works. So they have to break the code. And I tell all of the struggling readers, it's really I have to be a cheerleader and a coach, but they're really doing high-level brain work in breaking the code. Tip is that the background knowledge of the person and vocabulary are essential. So you'll see some kids in this slide. We always did project-based learning in my classroom, but they have to understand what it is they're reading. So you have to build the background. So if I were to read a passage about cricket, for example, or something for which I have no experience, it would be difficult for me to understand. So it's the teacher's job to teach that vocabulary ahead of time and also build the background knowledge. Slide change, please. So the simple view of reading. Two men, Tumner and Goff, they developed this model of reading acquisition in 1986. Many teachers with whom I talk have never heard of Tumner and Goff and never heard of the simple view of reading. However, in the United States, our legislators, our lawmakers are starting to take note, and they are demanding that the science of reading, the simple view of reading, be utilized. So in my home state of Ohio, we have specific language where school districts must start adopting this. So what does it mean? They came up with an equation. So your ability to comprehend what you read is the product of two things: decoding, breaking the code, the alphabetic code, and also your language comprehension. So the language comprehension comes from your speaking ability, your background knowledge. So background knowledge and vocabulary are essential. But they said first comes decoding, and then we can work on comprehension, fluency, and vocabulary. But it's not an either or proposition. Okay, please change the slide. Okay, what is an example? So language comprehension is a student's ability to understand the meaning when someone is talking or when text is read aloud to you. Decoding is your ability to read printed words quickly and accurately. And in the program that I teach, when we use one of our books, they don't have any picture clues. They have to be able to decode precisely. And this will help them in the long run. Slide change, please. So both of these processes are very complex. And scientists have done brain imaging studies, and they see which areas of the brain light up, and they know how taxing this is for the human brain. So word recognition, the decoding is difficult. Language comprehension is difficult. But if the student masters these two complex skills, they will be able to understand what they will read. So it's really critical to start early literacy programs. So if they don't learn to decode in our early grades, they'll grow into adults who cannot learn to read, who do not know how to read. And I have worked with adults who have not learned to read. And what is the biggest problem? They don't understand the alphabetic code. They don't understand the sound symbol relationship. Next slide, please. So reading words automatically is only part of the work after they have to comprehend. So I've talked about that. Project-based learning in my classroom was my strategy to bring the world, to connect students to the world. And I said, the world is your classroom. And so we had animals in our classroom. The kids they used objects to build cars, to study force and motion, but bringing in active learning experiences is also really critical. Next slide, please. Okay, what I love about Global Dream are the toolkits that have already been developed. And the toolkits, I love that they're packaged neatly, that kids can break apart on the perforated edges, the symbols and the sounds, and they can create words even when no one is around. And that there is a diagnostic quiz or assessment at the end of their sessions. I love that Dr. Gandhi and her team are doing these detox and I had never heard the term disruptive literacy or disruptive education, and that's exactly what we must do. I love that your lessons are structured, and Dr. Gandhi states that through her experience and her team's experience that 30 hours is a good time frame for kids to learn how to read. And after thinking about that, and with the students with whom I work, I really endorse that beginning literacy, the foundational literacy, can be achieved in 30 hours. And that teaching students to write their name on whatever surface they have is the very first step. I love that Global Dream is training volunteers. The website is developed, and there are fundraising efforts. But this isn't just a third world problem. This is a problem across our country as well in the United States. Slide change, please. Okay, and so I guess what drew me to the detox as well is how what you're doing, how your work can inform what we might be able to start or grow upon in the United States with the things that you have already structured and are inherent in your program. Slide change, please. Okay, so when I talk about systematic literacy, people may wonder, what in the world do you mean? So in English, we have 6 syllable types, and most people don't even know that. But in step 1 of our system, we teach 3 sounds, words with 3 sounds, and they all have short vowel sounds. They're closed syllables. Then we go to step 2, and it's 4 sounds, closed syllables, step 3, and we so on. Okay, slide change, please. And you can see the systematic, explicit way that this program is laid out. Slide change, please. Okay, one of the things that I was sharing with the team earlier was that we use something, this magnetic tile board, and cognitive scientists also know that the sensory input is really, really important. So the kids manipulate these tiles and they can move them around. So for example, when I build the word mat in English, I will pull down my MAT tile, and then we want them to manipulate the sounds. So here's mat, and then we will ask them to oops, I'm going the wrong way. Mat. And then we'll say, okay, now change that word to bat, because they have to understand rhyming. They have to work with these. So there are several concepts, but the manipulated tools are really helpful for our learners. Okay, and next slide. Okay, teaching vocabulary, and also, I can't stress this enough, but reviewing concepts that they've already learned. So that repetition is really important at the start of every lesson. But literacy takes time, and it takes a commitment. And I've had students who want to read or say they want to read, but aren't willing to put the work in. So there has to be a kind of a communion that occurs between the learner and the teacher, that we come together and they really want to work toward achieving literacy. Next slide, please. And I agree very strongly with Dr. Gandhi and her team that literacy for all is achievable across our world. And it is the greatest social justice issue in America. And that is my mission, is to educate people about what we need to be doing to change the trajectory of illiteracy in my own country. And I'm willing to help anywhere else. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miss Mary, for this very thought-provoking presentation. And you've really demystified a lot of definitions. Conceptually, I think there is, of course, globally a lot of debate over what we mean by literacy. What should be the right definition for looking at fluency, looking at so many other things as well. And in India also as well, of course, there's a raging debate on, what is the right yardstick as well. So you've really helped set course for this discussion as well. Here we would also like to invite Sunita Gandhi ji as well, who has been intently listening to your presentation like all of us. Sunita ji, any thoughts or any questions for Miss Mary McCoolberry?
Mary, I found that to be fascinating, your presentation. Firstly, that it seems to me just an observation that in majority of the places we suffer generations of losses because we don't focus on evidence-based learning, and we go on our hunches. So a great cool educator has some hunch, and suddenly everybody's doing that, like the whole language approach. uh, and it's almost going against data that's shown that it doesn't work. And yet, I think a lot of schools are still following it across many parts of the world, because they live in a myth. And I think so. One of the observations is you've taken a very pragmatic approach. I would say an experimental approach, because you're working with learners and they're kind of feeding on the system and helping. It's a two-way process, I suppose, of learning. uh, and for me it has been like that my learners have been my conduit for my learning. And when I first began working on literacy, when I came back to India, actually I don't know whether I've mentioned this to you, but I worked for 10 years at the World Bank in Washington DC, and so I lived in the US. And I know that when I came here to India, it was just like, for me, a whole bunch of mystery, why people are not focusing on fundamental literacy. And when I would go to the government office, they'd say, "Oh, no, no, literacy is passe. We want to work on whole language. We want to work on entire education." So there was a disconnect, and the idea that we could do things faster was definitely on my mind. That learning doesn't need to drag out quite so much as it does. And so I took an experimental approach where I had learners in front of me in my office, and we'd sit together and we'll laugh and giggle and all that, but at the same time take serious stuff into hands. And it was really a hair-raising experience the day that a completely illiterate lady, a 27-year-old lady whose name is Baby, and she could read, it was 12 letters in the first 5 minutes. And I said, wow. I mean, all she was doing was picture reading, pictures and sounds. But then the next part, which is like connecting two sounds to make a word. In Hindi, we can make a lot of words that are two-letter words. And then we also gave her three-letter and four-letter words, and she could read all of that. In just 5 minutes, she understood the whole methodology. But her mind was really working hard. And you could tell she was really exhausted from that extra hard work in the mind. And
Yes.
she was like, phew, can I take a break? And so she went away, and we brought her back in 2 hours later after her lunch hour. And then we sat with her for another 20 minutes. And this lady was reading gobs. The lady who only knew one letter and one sound now is reading like loads of them. So we have captured that, luckily, though it's not a very high quality video, as our first learning. It's on our YouTube
Wow.
account. And that kind of hair-raising experience. So why don't we work like Dr. Maria Montessori did, with a laboratory of our own children, and learn so much from them by experimenting, implementing change? But yes, we have to begin with the question in our minds that, is it possible to disrupt? Is it possible to do things vastly differently? So it's like a mobile phone versus a landline phone. It's disruptive. It's actually changing all our notions of what it means to carry a gadget that just connects on the phone with each other. So we can do so much more with it. And you can't do it by just fixing the old landline phone. That there is a paradigm shift involved. So what are your thoughts on that? It'd be interesting to hear. And I really loved all the things you said, like music to the ears, like symbol to sound, or symbol plus sound, the connection between the symbol and the sound, as well as the phonemic awareness, which is basically, we're talking about sound to letter understanding. And then breaking the code, then building a background, then decoding and encoding all these words you've used, and then the comprehension of matter that happens by building the background. And then, of course, your whole hierarchy in which your program runs. So it's good for, I think, all our listeners to learn about your program, because they probably will be interested in trialing it in their schools and their different places. We'll kind of work towards that goal. and the idea of sensory input and your magnetic board. All these are essential elements of learning by self. So teacher as a facilitator or as a mentor, but actually you're not in the picture because the child has figured out what they need to do, and they rather get on with it on their own. So
Yes, and I agree with you, Dr. Gandhi. I don't think we need to drag this out any longer. That we take an inordinate amount of time with trying all these different approaches, where it's a very simple thing when we teach phonics and phonemic awareness, and even just teaching them to tap with their fingers the sounds. So k, a, t, cat. So they can be taught, if you don't have magnetic tiles, you can use your fingers to think about the sounds in that word. So what strikes me is I don't understand why it's so complicated. Reading is a complicated process, but our methodologies don't have to be. And once we teach the kids, many of my students could come on this program and show you exactly how we go through a lesson on their own without me. Just, I would be the guide on the side. So I agree with you that this can be replicated all over, and that we just need to get busy, and we need to stop talking about the different theories. We have to go with the evidence and the data, as you suggested. We have to go with what scientists have shown in numerous studies. It's indisputable. The evidence is indisputable. I can't hear you.
yes, I was saying fantastic, because the evidence is right in front of you. You've got these kids, and if they're learning at a 10 times faster pace, you're doing something right. So that could be a good test. Are they learning? Are they dragging? Are they coming back to the class? Are they excited about their learning? I think there's a lot of enjoyment when we can decode for ourselves,
Yes.
rather than somebody tells us. So, and sometimes, I see the parents are so eager to tell the child. There was a video of a little child where witnessing a lot of great reading going on with ages 5, 6, and 7, which we never thought they could. Where what we call matra wale shabd, they're able to read a newspaper at age 6 and 7. So how is that possible? But where we found that the child was losing a bit of confidence was when the parent was overly bearing and constantly correcting the child. Oh, read it like this, not like that. But let the child figure it out. Give him time. Let's just stay away from his learning process because it's cognitive. They need that thinking time, and give them that thinking time.
That's absolutely right. And for struggling readers, their self-esteem is low already. So what I find is I have to be their cheerleader, and I have to show them exactly what they're doing well, that they're persevering, that they're tenacious, and they don't give up. So I agree with you. And I also believe too, if parents want to get involved, they can model good reading by reading aloud and having their child follow along or listen, and then they can have an informal discussion about the story. But overcorrection is not the way to help any reader. It's very detrimental.
I just could not watch it. I said to the teacher that, please, can you talk to the parents? Because this is almost criminal. Why are they doing this? They're hurting their own child's growth. They obviously know the answer. They don't need to prove to anybody they know the answer. Let the child figure it out for themselves. There's another child who's 14 years of age in grade 2 level in a government school, and yesterday I got a video. This is my evidence. I have my team working with their various kinds of learners, and so Tom Delaney, who's one of my volunteers in Australia, living in India. So he sent me this video, and he's in a slum teaching this boy, 14-year-old, who's at grade 2 level, and he cannot even recognize maybe a handful of letters. The kind of thing you were mentioning about the 13-year-old Sarah. So we have to, not dumbify the kids. We have to get them to feel they do well. And nothing gives more confidence, perhaps, to a child than seeing their own progress for themselves and witnessing their own progress. So we don't need to do any pep talk, like, oh, well done, when actually they have not done so well, and so forth. Let them feel their own improvement and make it intrinsic as much as possible. What's your view on that?
Yes. My view on that is exactly what you're saying. And to have that growth mindset that I'm not there yet, but I will be. To have that deep intrinsic belief that I will grow and I will become literate and a reader. So yeah, I guess I need to temper my statement a little bit that you don't want to over encourage them, because it should be something that they're pleased about inside. But I will say, when they make mistakes, I say, I celebrate mistakes, because I said, if we pay attention, that's when the most learning can occur. And we all make mistakes. And I talk about my mistakes that I make every day. But I think when they, that intrinsic euphoria, when it starts to all come together, there's nothing like it. And that's what I love. I feel that's the miracle that I watch when they, all of a sudden, it makes sense. And that's been happening with a couple of my students in recent months. And it's just to see them even become more confident, because now they are part of the rest of the community. They don't feel like they're isolates.
Very true. So that's wow moment, or the light bulbs going on in their minds, and then they feel so encouraged by that intrinsic, understanding that I've understood. It's great that you brought up Carol S. Dweck and her growth mindset, because perhaps, I don't know to what extent it is in America anymore. I left a few years ago, but it could be that we are, though she did not write it specifically for teachers, her book called Mindset, but she has really hit upon a point, because maybe a lot of education and educators are suffering with the fixed mindset about what it means to educate, about how to educate, and they seem to already know all the answers, and that perhaps could be a problem for implementing innovative change and disruptive change. What are your views on that?
Oh, my view, I love Carol Dweck's work. And I will, in the United States, her work in the growth mindset, at least in the schools with whom I've worked, it is part of their philosophy within the school, this growth mindset, that students must believe that things are flexible and nimble and change, and they're moving toward a goal. So I really, it is my belief, no matter if you are someone of privilege or you're underprivileged, I believe everyone can access this information. They can learn to decode and encode, which is writing and spelling. And it's accessible to everyone. But we have to believe that in our education system. And we can't follow things so narrowly. And I think that's what my biggest obstacle was as an educator, were administrators or the top level, where they weren't willing to see things differently and really consult the science and the data. But they were going along with a program, which was difficult, because that is not growth mindset. It's very rigid.
It's a blueprint approach. Once you make a blueprint, then everybody lives by it for the rest of their lives. Even when they make the teacher planners, often, obviously, they tend to want to stick to how they taught the previous year. They understand it, they've perfected it, and so on. But sometimes they can become the constraint to future growth. So what triggers a teacher to think differently, like you did, and you came up with a breakaway approach that works?
So I will be, in all honesty, when I finished college in 1987, I was taught the whole language method. And then I went on to get my master's degree in reading, and whole language was the rage in America. And because I was a voracious reader and loved it, I thought, oh, this is what we do. We give kids books and we teach them whole word and we teach them picture clues. And I taught for about 5 years, and there were students that I did not teach to read. And I was so alarmed because I thought, oh my gosh, very little phonics, if any, was present in our instruction. And I love the idea of real books, but I knew I still have those kids' faces in my mind that I left behind. And it wasn't until later when I had a student and his parents said, you know, we have to approach this differently. And there is a program that is, you know, research-based. And so I went and was trained for this program, but I was always very vocal in my opposition because our school district still uses balanced literacy. And I was very vocal in trying to make them aware that it leaves some kids behind, and we can't afford to leave anyone behind. So it was, I had to leave the system in order to go off and do my own thing, because I'm not encumbered by what I can say or what I can't say now. But I find it really interesting that there is a whole huge group of people who are working toward evidence-based reading instruction. If we get that underway, I really believe we'll solve the literacy crisis. I really do.
Well, it seems so odd that something so simple cannot be more widespread. And, you know, why should any child be left behind? Uh, Giving them the opportunity to come up to grade level and beyond is or should not be such a big daunting task. If you look around and see what are alternative approaches, what are working, I mean, the answer might lie in something simple. But why are the teachers not exploring? Why are they not like scientists and looking for new things? Because obviously there's a need. The children are suffering, or some children are suffering. And how can a good teacher allow that?
The teachers with whom I worked are afraid to challenge the administrators who have made the decisions, because there was, you know, there could be repercussions for not following the party line. So, you know, I was an outlier along with some other people who were mostly veteran teachers who saw that we're on the wrong path and we need to correct this. But I continue to speak out in my local community. And what I realize is happening all over America because I work with children virtually, and the parents have no idea. They don't even know the term balanced literacy. So part of my mission is to educate Americans about what's happening in the schools. And we have really wonderful reports, but not everyone is reading them. So my mission is also to amplify their voices by posting and shouting as loudly as I can that there is a better way, and we just need to get going. We need to start yesterday.
Well, I hope you shout our way as well, because we certainly can learn from all the resources you're pulling together from, good evidence-based resources. I think we need to learn from them as well. So we'll amplify them here with your permission, and that would be a good thing. We are working primarily with the underprivileged, though literacy problem does not really depend on economic level. It depends on how we teach a child, whether sitting in a private school, fancy school, or village school. We have been working primarily with the underprivileged children. And one of the modalities we tried out in working with them and illiterate adults was having students who know how to read becoming the teachers. And it's worked out really well. So,
I think, Dr. Gandhi, this is a brilliant approach. It's a brilliant approach. And even, some of the things that I'm doing with this program where I'm teaching, it absolutely could be taught to a volunteer, and then they could go out and disseminate, and they can work with children and adults to achieve literacy. So I love that idea. And I think that's the way you grow it.
Sure. And you mentioned earlier project-based learning. So basically, older children mentoring younger ones, or even just peers learning with each other. So without classifying them, and don't know, peers have a very good way to figure things out, and we don't need to interfere with that, perhaps. The peer learning opportunities should probably be explored a little more than they are. We tend to think the teacher's role is to teach and children's role is to listen and do as they're told. Um, I think now maybe we can consider teacher's role is to be a mentor and sit on the side and just ask good questions and say nothing. Don't answer a thing. Don't tell anything. Let them solve it. You just don't have to solve everything for them.
That's absolutely right. And that's how our kids are expected to grow up and work today, right? They have to solve the problems. But I think we have to have all these fancy materials and we need to buy things. But my thing was to take kids outside. Let's take a look at the leaves on the tree. I wonder how these leaves breathe. I wonder how this tree lives. And taking little magnifying lenses or just looking. So asking all these questions, generating questions about the world around them is really, really important. And then you just get into a discussion with them about plants and photosynthesis. But it doesn't have to be like, I think we think it has to be so structured. It does not. And you're right that kids can learn so much on their own because they are creative and they use their imaginations and ingenuity.
Fabulous. It's actually marvelous to think that, educators in two different parts of the world coming to synergistic kind of understanding of how to teach so children may learn more and better, and also to improve their psychology so they feel they're capable, they can meander through life, that they can construct learning for themselves and so forth. It's just awesome to recognize the fact that we can do that on Detox.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yes. In Detox, you are the first. I haven't come across anyone like you, Dr. Gandhi, with this vision and this idea to disrupt what we're doing. So I just find it to be such a brilliant idea that you have put into practice, and it's very pragmatic and it's working.
Actually, yes, it is working. And the idea of, disruptive is a very negative word in some ways. But, we've seen reimagine education. We've seen, reconstruct education, re-engineer education, so many words. But I felt that somehow they didn't go deep enough or didn't make that huge impact on our psychology. So the word disruptive actually makes us probably think that we can disrupt. I was talking to Alfie Kohn, and I'm sure you know Alfie. Yeah, so Alfie is somebody I've known for a few years, and I've been an admirer of his from the time I read a book by him, Punished by Rewards. And, I really do believe in intrinsic motivation, not extrinsic rewards. And we don't use them here, at least not in the context that I'm working with. So he has influenced a lot of thinking. And he, was really supporting some of these, he did not like the term disruptive. He says, I don't like the word disruptive. So I tried to sort of convince him, but he says, no, it doesn't work. And he's such a great author and such a great thinker. So I'm still in dilemma, could there be a better word than disruptive? But I do want people to think disruptively. I want them to think totally out of the box. I want them to think in a paradigm shift, in not incremental change, but dramatic change.
This is the perfect word. Why? We are in crisis across our world. I mean, when you in the United States, we have so much, and when a third of our kids or more are not reading proficiently, then something must be disruptive. Alarm bells need to go off. So I love the word, and I think it hit me so deeply when I learned of your organization.
Brilliant. I really wanted to hear that because, here in isolation of Mashood being in Kashmir, the Milita in Lucknow and another colleague of mine in Gujarat, we're working in this very online world together to launch this Detox. as a collaborative in a way, because we are, all part of this global dream mission, which is basically to support the goals, SDG 4 goals on education, especially 4.6, universalization of literacy and numeracy by 2030. And going by historical rates of conversion, we'll never get there, because even the best of historical rates are not going to support that kind of a change. We're going to be in this perennial problem for a lot longer. So we have to disrupt. That was another.
And so Dr. Gandhi, you think about the climate change, all of our big issues in our world that affect all of us. We need kids and people to be able to be literate, because we have to address these issues. So our governments really need to take note that we need kids to be able to think and imagine and read and write, because they could come up with some of the solutions to some of the problems we're facing. So it's such a ripple.
Undoubtedly, just like you said, the school superintendents sometimes have a particular mindset and they impose that on everyone, rather than saying, okay, everyone just figure out which is the best way and we'll look at that evidence and implement that. So policymakers tend to be gatekeepers to the old and the established ways of thinking, or their own ways of thinking. And I think now we need to also disrupt that kind of thinking, because anything that is not an open door policy to change is a constraint. If things have not if they had gone really well, we can relax, but they haven't gone well. So your point is well taken. Is there any last comment you'd like to make? Well, I just noticed the time, it's getting on with that. Is there any comment you'd like to make, please?
No, I feel so energized being with you and your team, because it's what we all need to be doing. So thank you very much. And thank you for having me on your program.
Thank you, Mary. And please stay connected. We just want every bit of you here in India. So let's see how we figure out any way, whichever way, to get you to India and to interact with educators. We host every year a conference called Ed Leadership. And so we did one in January. It was the biggest conference, a online conference. We had speakers, 85 speakers from 37 countries. Wow. And so they brought together a lot of amazing ideas. I was just glued to the screen 11 hours a day and just learning so much and making briskly notes, even though I was trying to manage the show a bit as well. But I'd love to have you as a presenter for our Ed Leadership coming up next.
I would be honored.
Right. And just for all the viewers here, Detox also is hosting a conference on the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th of September, which is when we have the 8th of September as the International Literacy Day. So that evening, we'll have a cultural program in the evening. And then the next 4 days, we'll be deliberating on eradicating literacy poverty. And the sub-theme of that is basically urgent actions that need to be taken now. So how can we take those urgent actions and move forward? And just a reminder that we at Detox are talking about 4 ACTS acts. And first act is awareness, A. Then C for commitment, that we can make towards change, because that's necessary. It's not just talking, it's going out and making that change and making that commitment for the change. T is for target. We need to go in a targeted way, because then we accomplish a lot more. And so we need to set our own targets. So, okay, by tomorrow I'll do X or Y or Z, and we need to act so fast. And then the last is S, and that's sharing. So that's what we did today as well, is sharing, and lots of great ideas that have come from Mary McCool. I cannot thank her enough. I really appreciate all of you joining us, and many more. Please forward the video to others as well. Thank you. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi. Thank you.